Ladies and gentlemen, come to order if you will, please. We do have a quorum for the Education and Incentives of Workforce Subcommittee of the Small Business Development Committee. So Chairman Chokas will present a bill to us today. Mr. Chairman, whenever you're ready.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, members of the committee. Chairman Washburn, thank you for allowing me to make this presentation this morning. I'm bringing to you today House Bill 611 LC 500185. And this legislation came to us from Scott Hilton on the Georgia First Commission. And all we're doing is taking the definition of small business and dividing it into 3 tiers. This is more or less enabling legislation so that in the future, through the state purchases, if we wanted to purchase something other than 300 employees and 30 million or less, we can pinpoint it with laser focus. So what the bill does is it takes the definition of small business and creates 3 tiers. Tier 1 is 10 or fewer employees with $1 million or less in sales per year. Tier 2 is 100 or fewer employees with $10 million or less in gross receipts per year. And Tier 3 is our standard definition, which is 300 or fewer employees and $30 million or less in gross year's receipts. That's all it does, is it just tiers it within the definition of small business. So at some point in time in the future, we can pinpoint specific areas that we may be interested in focusing the state's purchases. I'll be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are there any questions for Chairman Chokas about his bill? Chair recognizes Representative Baricchio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to you, Chairman Chokas, thank you for bringing this. It must be a really good bill. I noticed the second signer on here was from the 169th district. But I did think about this over the weekend. You and I have talked a lot about this bill with Scott Hilton, with Georgians First. In the future, let's just say hypothetically, there are incentives for Tier 1 small businesses. And I'm a small business that has 11 employees, and I do $1,001 in gross revenue, whatever. Would there be a way to sort of prorate me into that benefit in some way? Because it would be hard for me to terminate an employee just so I could get a small business incentive because I'm 1 employee over the 10, or that I'm $1 over the, I'm just trying to think in my mind what future policy would look like as it relates to this tier system, and making sure that there is a way to include as many small businesses as possible that are between 10 employees and 100. That's a big jump in rural Georgia. And so just curious as what our thoughts are about that in the future.
Great question. And I've thought about that myself, because there is a big jump between 10 and 100. And there's also a big jump between 100 and 300. This is the first step. I'd like to get this passed as is this year. There's nothing etched in stone about the tiers. And then maybe later on, as we see what the needs are, maybe divide the tiers up even more and reword it and have maybe 10 or less, 50 or less, 100 or less, 200 or less, and so forth. I don't have a problem with that at all. I think it's an excellent, thought process, but I'd like to get this done as is this year, just to get the ball rolling. And Dominic, I'm not sure what the governor has in mind next year. And so I'm welcome to any ideas or thoughts.
At the proper time, I would make a motion.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions from any committee members? Who is 15? Representative Pruitt.
Thank you. Chairman, I'm just trying to understand the scope of this. So I have a couple businesses and they'll do federal procurements and they'll be small business disadvantaged, all kind of different categories and groups. And so that it looks like that's what we're trying to create here. And so is the thought then that state procurement would turn around and say, hey, we need to buy a good or a service and we need some tier one. I'm missing the connect, I guess, between the edict to the state purchasing group that says, hey, you need to purchase, so much goods or services from a tier one, so much from a tier two. Is that the thought that we move to that business model within the procurement division?
Yes, sir. Exactly.
Okay.
That we could say, let's buy 10 or 20% from a tier one, 20 or 30% from a tier two, and 30 or 40% from a tier three. Currently, if I'm not mistaken, and Representative Larikia, you help me with this. Currently, none of the state purchases fall in the tier one or the tier two category. They all fall in the tier three category, which is 300 employees or less, or $30 million in sales per year.
Okay. But aren't you just now creating tier one and two? So there hasn't been a tier.
That's
tier
right. But
three
what
up
I'm
until
trying
now.
to say is it's always been in that high range.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
That's what I was trying to say.
Okay, I got you. Yes. So businesses, I get three, they would fall into those three categories, and then state purchasing would start allocating and divvying up that what we're going to do with purchasing, and then they would fall in these, and that would give some of these very small business tier ones a competitive advantage over a 300 million or $30 million company. Is that?
We're not trying to give them a competitive advantage. What we're trying to do is allocate the state's resources in a manner that would be conducive for small business. 300 employees or less and $30 million in sales is a pretty high number. And anything we can do to bring attention to the smaller businesses within the small business, that's all we're doing. We're just putting tiers in the definition of small business.
Okay. Yeah. And for me, I see it as a competitive advantage because the federal government says woman-owned small business or small disadvantaged veteran-owned small business, those kind of categories. And so I can't compete unless I fit into one of those groups. And so that's what I'm trying to understand, is that from procurement side, we're going to start making sure that we're ordering stuff.
This
from these
is
three tiers.
enabling legislation.
Okay. Step one.
Step one.
Gotcha. Okay. Bigger picture. All right. Thank
Thank
you. That's
you.
what I was looking for.
Okay, any other questions from any of the committee members? Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Leader
and
Larikia.
since Chairman Chokas mentioned, I would just follow up with Representative Pruitt, is that it's not just in procurement type opportunities. It's also in future state-funded incentives, because one of the things we learned on the Rural Development Council, traveling around all over the state for the last couple of years, is that really small businesses from 1 employee to 10 have almost no opportunities for tax exemptions or programs that would help them. There's jobs tax credits and different things like that, but even many of those say you have to hire, it starts at 25 or goes to 50, and then there's all these requirements where the guy that owns let's just say a lawn maintenance or landscaping or a pool, a swimming pool company or whatever that has 8 or 10 employees, we may look at doing some sort of state-funded tax exemptions or state funded tax benefits to these really small companies. And then what we do is we break that down where if you're a tier 1, you get this. If you're a tier 2, you get this. And so it's not just in procurement. There's a lot of the sky's the limit as to what this legislature may vote to do to support small businesses. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions? These are excellent questions and commentary about this. Any other questions? If not, the chair will entertain a motion. We have a motion and a second for due pass. All in favor say aye. All opposed,
Aye.
say no. And it does pass.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I appreciate your help and support.
Thank you, Chairman Chokes. Excellent bill. And without objection, we'll stand adjourned.